Good morning, everyone. All right. Well, this morning was an interesting morning. It was a difficult morning. Um, not really difficult, but it was more so just it was a very annoying morning for a lot of it. And I'm gonna review everything we did this morning. And yeah, only took two trades today. Now we'll start with the pre-market analysis. Pre-market analysis was very obvious. Pre-market analysis was obviously bullish. Now the first candle or one candle before market open changes that just a tad. But I mean, if we come over here and like jump to the 15-minute, you're going to see a potential NQ cup and handle. But ES looks much better. ES, as you can see, has made lower highs. And on every way, every time it rebounded from the pullbacks, it invalidated a vast majority of the move, just barely coming up short from the recent pivot. When you see price action like this, 8 to 9 times out of 10, I'd say 8.5 to 9 times out of 10, very bullish pre-market setup. Very bullish for the pivots above, which I marked out in yellow. And so yeah, that was my pre-market sentiment. I'm bullish for this supply to break on ES and then to get to these yellow lines up here. But in order for that to do, I'm going to need the market to open fairly bullish. Now, this is not the first candle on market open. This is one candle before market open. And right now it's looking like if this entire little pullback invalidates, I will be entering calls for the supply break on ES. Well, here's the first candle on market open. NQ's right out of the gate way, way stronger than ES. Now, QQQ calls were tempting, but the pre-market analysis was mostly on ES. NQ doesn't have a nearby major pivot. While it has this one here, it doesn't have really any above that. And I need ES to also confirm my bullish bias before I enter. Sometimes I won't and I'll enter calls anyways, like on NQ, for example, right now. I almost did. But with how weak ES was, it was complete 50-50. Either QQQ calls or SPX puts. And I do not take 50-50 trades, right? And I'm glad that I waited because this candle opened green, was close to entering, but as you guys know, I wait till the last like 10 to 15 seconds of each candle before I make a decision on entering, right? And I'm glad that I waited because we dumped. Now, we dumped really hard. I didn't get the chance to hop in puts or anything. I did actually scalp puts very briefly this morning, not even a chance to alert it. We put in a perfect double bottom right here on ES, which you guys know I'm very bullish to break, bearish to break. And then this buying wick went all the way up here. I filled puts and then I scalped it. I sold it the second it hit this level. So I made almost 10% on that trade. I made like $30 a contract. Wasn't something that was even possible to alert. It was just a quick, tiny little scalp by me. And it was very light size as well because the risk to reward was terrible. So I didn't really count that trade. But as you can see, ES took out all the pivots. And NQ at this point is starting to look bearish for these pivots down here. You know, my bias is not biased, if that makes sense. Okay, so obviously the pre-market bias I had this morning was bullish. But I'm a standard neutral trader. I try my best to be, which means if that current analysis is invalidated, I am now bearish. For the same reasons that I was bullish, which means which was because we had lower highs, and on every single one of the bounces, we invalidated a vast majority of each pullback. That's a bullish setup. By those exact same standards, I am now bearish on NQ to get to these levels down here because we have higher lows. And on every single retracement back down, we invalidated a vast majority of each bounce, right? You can kind of see it's kind of forming an ascending broadening wedge here. Now, I can't really enter on this candle though because I don't know when ES is going to bottom. You know, it's dumping, but it's only been 3 candles since market open. We're getting a buying wick here. NQ's still in heavy demand. I can't enter here. Now here, I could potentially enter, but this is 50-50. Once again, massive divergence on the charts. NQ is extremely strong, and ES is extremely weak. It is absolutely 50-50, right? It's either SPX puts or QQQ calls. I can very easily make money on both. If ES bounces just a little bit, NQ's probably going to take out the pre-market high. If NQ invalidates the green candle, ES is probably going to take out the next pivot, right? And I'm bearish for the next demand. I'm bearish for the next pivot, but it's probably going to get demand after that. Spoiler alert, it didn't. So this was my only solid opportunity to enter puts, besides the tiny little scalp that I took that didn't really, I don't really count that. And it's a 50-50 trade. I do not enter 50-50 trades, right? It could easily be wrong. It could easily be right. It's perfectly 50-50. I need both to start looking bearish. Well, we break to the downside, and NQ's still kind of in demand. The only way I could enter puts is if we bounce and invalidate that bounce, and both NQ and ES looks bearish, and I capitalize on whichever one's weaker, right? So ES sweeps the pivot, and oh look, now NQ is starting to catch up, weakness-wise. It's now weak. I'm bearish for NQ to get these pivots here, okay? ES put in a green doji. NQ put in a massive red candle. Now NQ's weaker. So I'm like, okay, if I'm bearish for NQ to get to the pivots, if it misses the pivots and bounces, I can hop in, right? I'm also bearish for ES to get to demand. Well, NQ sweeps these pivots here, which indicates a bullish liquidity sweep. It did miss this one down here. But I still have one remaining price target, which is ES to demand. So for that reason, I'm kind of thinking this is going to be a dead cat bounce. So if I see indications of that, and I see a decent opportunity to capitalize on weakness, I can take a trade here. We're starting to chop up. We're getting selling wicks, indicating that this bounce may be temporary. And I fill puts here during this candle. I filled QQQ puts right here, roughly right when most of the bounce was invalidated. From the gate, it was extremely clear that NQ was much weaker than ES, right? Much, much weaker than ES. If you actually break down this candle, we opened here on NQ, and we started out green, and we got to a high of here, failing to make a higher high. ES, on the other hand, opened more green, actually ran up and made a higher high here. So ES kind of put in a micro bearish liquidity sweep. So from the start, I knew NQ flipped weaker because of that. And then the red started happening, and then the candle started going down. And once a majority of this bounce was invalidated, I was able to enter QQQ puts. And at that time, ES was still roughly like only right here, right? ES didn't really drop much during the end of the candle, right? Pretty much in the last 20 seconds of the candle, ES didn't drop any more than it already did. So I entered those puts at 76 cents, and immediately they shot up because we got new low of day. But right now I'm looking for this pivot on NQ, but really I'm looking for demand on ES. And if this does put in dead cat bounce, which it looks like it, I mean, look at how strong the trend is. Look at the candlestick formation we have here on this bounce. We have higher highs with selling wicks. We've invalidated a majority of the bounce on both ES and NQ, as you can see here, right? And NQ did happen to continue. I got a great entry. This is a great trade. A very hard stop loss on this trade, though, but great trade. Unfortunately, right after I get in, it puts a potential reversal candle, and it reverses right back up. Now, if ES already hit demand, and I didn't have a solid bearish PT with this trade, I wouldn't have been able to enter when I did. I would have needed to wait for 2 oscillations. But because ES missed demand, it gave me ample reason to enter the trade. Also, NQ barely missed this pivot as well. So this was a pretty good trade. I stopped out right when it hit my stop loss, though. Actually, a little bit before, because it hit my stop loss and it came back down and put in a selling wick. And so I sold at 65 cents for roughly minus 15, 16%. Was a perfect trade, perfect strength and weakness analysis. ES just decided that it didn't want to go down anymore. So that was the first trade. And looking back on it, no regrets. It was the best. It was the only put trade that I was actually able to get in and alert. Like I said, I did take that scalp earlier, but that wasn't alertable, so I'm not going to talk about it. This was the only opportunity. The only other opportunity was this one, where I said it was a great put trade, but it was also a great QQQ call trade. It wasn't a great opportunity because it was 50-50. This trade was not 50-50. This one had like a solid probably 80-ish% chance of playing out. So anyways, I stopped out pretty early there, and now I'm going to be triggered back into calls once the majority of this drop invalidates. And look at NQ. NQ is actually flipping a lot stronger than ES. Looks really good at the moment. And I actually end up entering calls on this candle here. No, sorry. I enter calls at the end of this candle here, but when the alert got sent out, it technically sent out at the beginning of this candle. So all of you guys got a way better average than me. So I enter calls here for 66 cents. NQ has invalidated majority of the move. Again, same type of analysis, same type of bias, all of those things. And I'm looking for pre-market high. Now, yep, that's what I'm looking for. And I'll just delete this trade now. Here's pretty much the trade setup. Immediately, again, we put in a reversal candle. I'm thinking, well, I may go 0 for 2. Now, I did purposely save buying power to average down on this trade. But we did end up popping up. NQ looks great and strong. But we put in another reversal candle here on NQ with a selling wick and come down. And then ES puts in a reversal candle as well. NQ briefly flips weaker. And again, it's looking pretty bad. Now, I don't really plan on averaging down at this point because I try to average down only when I'm confident that it's likely to go up and hit PT. Right now, it's not looking too great. Now, I did call out that this candle here looks like a decent candle to average down on. You're getting lower lows with buying wicks. You can see the potential cup and handle forming, but that's the keyword potential. And right now, I don't know. ES doesn't look like a cup and handle ES. Because remember, this demand is still untouched. I still have some residue bearish bias for ES to get to demand. So, you know, there's really no point averaging down because I'm just one red candle away from now being bearish for ES to get to demand, right? So this trade hypothesis is fairly fragile, if you know what I mean. So it does end up being a pretty good place to average down, and it does work out. So here's where I noticed the call started to chop. I hit green on this candle. Was just above break even. I had an average of 66 cents. Right now they're at 70 cents. We got all the way to this first PT, this first pivot. Now, looking back, I kind of wish I trimmed here, but I didn't. Because look how much stronger ES is than NQ. Sorry, look how much stronger NQ is than ES. And chopping up is bearish, right? It's a bearish indicator. However, the longer you chop up and the steeper you chop up, the more bullish it becomes. So ES is chopping up. It kind of looks like a bear flag to the less experienced trader. But bear flags don't invalidate 50% of the entire initial leg. Sorry, 61% of the entire initial leg, right? I didn't realize that I rejected the 61.8 perfectly. That's not what a bear flag would do. A bear flag should not go above 38.2%, right? It should not retrace more than 38.2% of any move, right? And it's been chopping up now for 20 minutes. Well, how long was the downtrend? Like 6. Is that proportional? Absolutely not. So I am expecting ES to squeeze to the upside. But unfortunately, NQ puts in a bearish liquidity sweep against this pivot. Not here. Looks great to hit PT here, but I get hornswoggled. Makes a higher high with a volume spike, again signaling a bearish liquidity sweep. And it does end up dropping. But I'm still bullish because ES, or right here, I'm starting to think it's going to, I'm going to stop out of the trade, right? So before it got to this point, I was still fairly bullish because this could turn into bullish consolidation on NQ. But now, ES is retracing back down. NQ super weak, and the chop for these contracts start getting really bad. Remember, I entered at 66 cents right here, okay? Chop starts getting really bad, which is a huge red flag. And unfortunately, over the last 2 NQ candles, it looks like NQ flipped back to being weak, looking like it's going to barrel towards demand. So right here, I start losing faith in the trade thing. I'm going to stop out. But then this happens. Hang on. When did it? Hang on. Barely green. I forgot to talk about. This is when the calls were not chopping. I had to go back in my channel. The calls were chopping here. It was so bad that on this candle here, by the time this candle closed, you'd think I'd be up 10%. These calls were barely break even, okay? And when it hit this high, on this candle, I was red on the trade. It was back to 62 cents. On this candle here, I believe it hit a high of like 79 cents. Not 79. I believe it hit a high of like 70 cents. I was barely green on this trade right here. I don't think I got more than 10% on this. It was terrible. And then when this red candle happened, I was already back to being red on this trade. So the chop was absolutely unbearable during this trade. It was terrible. Now, when your premiums start decaying exponentially like that, keep in mind, I have not been in this trade relatively long, right? It's been, how long has it been? It's been 11 minutes. And my calls are getting annihilated. That's typically a huge red flag because that's, why do calls chop? Well, you're getting a lot of outflow of those calls. Why are you getting outflow? Well, people think it's going to go down. Most of the time, it does end up going down. But just like what I talked about with chopping up, price action wise, typically, if your calls are chopping a lot and a lot of people are selling, but somehow, some way, price action continues to hold its ground, that's indicative of a short squeeze. Why are people selling? Because people think it's bearish. What happens when people think it's bearish? They open short positions. What happens if the market does not go down despite everyone being bearish and invalidates every pullback? You're going to start getting short stop out. What happens when short stop out? You're going to get a short squeeze to the upside, and the contracts are going to pop right back up. Now, it's not going to go all the way back up because they're still chopped, but yeah. So this was really rough, guys. This was a rough time. But anyways, news came, and I ended up adding to my trade on this candle here. I told you guys at the beginning I saved buying power. In the alert channel, I saved buying power to add to this trade, whether it was average up or average down. You would think this is an average up. No, this was an average down. I filled when the candle was right here, just a little bit below where it closed. I filled it 61 cents for most of my contracts. 60 and mostly 61 cents. So this was actually an average down. That's how terrible this trade was in the beginning. So I was very jealous of all you futures traders. You had a way better time than I did. So my average dropped to 63 cents. This is my PT here. And chop, terrible chop. Huge red. I'm back to red on this trade. It's terrible. But then finally we end up getting the short squeeze. NQ was nice and strong. ES. Now I didn't predict the short squeeze on NQ. I predicted on ES. Started getting good here. I took a decent sized trim. I trimmed off a little more than half here. Or only half because I wanted ES to make a higher high before I started selling more, which it was extremely likely to do considering that this chopping down this chopping up here started turning to bullish chopping down with lower lows and lower highs. 98% chance it's at least going to get this high. And it did. There you go. And it continued through. So this was very nice. And it was roughly, it wasn't this candle. This candle started having red flags because it got a buying wick. This candle, I predicted that the next candle would be bullish, and it was. On this candle, this is where I pretty much closed everything besides a very small runner position. At this point, I was up, finally, I was up okay, like an okay amount. I was up roughly 60% gains right here. Keep in mind that first trade was only 15%. And again, I always talk about it. This is what you get when you get an analyst like me that doesn't give a shit about their win rate. Pretty much no other analysts that alert on Discord and get paid for it do trade the way I do because they care too much about their win rate. If they get a red trade, for at least half of their red trades, they try really hard to save them to preserve their beloved win rate, which I've been one of those people, so I get it. And you're going to get a lot of averaging down. You're going to get, stop getting updates. you're going to miss your next trades, because all taking a loss is, as I say it all the time, a red trade is nothing more than a business expense that makes you available for your next winning trade. Because I don't care about my win rate, the second my hypothesis, the initial reasoning behind me getting in my trade, is invalidated, I get out of the damn trade. So I got in this put trade because this bounce invalidated. Now there's other reasons here like the PT, and there's other sentiment reasons, but as far as the trigger for this trade, I got in because this bounce, most of this bounce invalidated, which means I will get out when the invalidation invalidates. This invalidation is my hypothesis. The second it goes away, I am out of the trade. What does that do for me? It allows me to take advantage of moves like these and keep losses small. So I only lost 15% on that trade. Some trades are going to lose 40%. I stop out when my hypothesis is invalidated. If it, I have my biggest percent alert loss in months, which was like minus 43%. And you know why that was? Because it sat there and chopped sideways until my contract decayed a ton. Then it finally hit my stop loss. But I don't get out until my hypothesis, which is always TA based, when the TA behind my hypothesis is invalidated. And because I'm able to do that, I'm able to take advantage of trades like these, and we keep our losses small. Our wins are usually at least 30 to 50% larger than my losses on average. Realistically, probably if you include trimming, because obviously if you look at my alerts and see what the green trades get to, yeah, my average loss is going to be like 20%. My average win is going to be like 60%. But realistically, who holds their entire position until 60%? I definitely don't. So on average, my wins are roughly 30 to 50% larger than my losses, and I win more than I lose, so it's pretty damn good. But anyways, it's running here. I'm still bullish for ES pre-market high, which I'm bullish for at least this to hit, but by that time, I'll be bullish for this as well. But I only have a small runner position left because it's still got a long ways to go. And we continue going. It hits 90% gains. Sorry, 71% gains is what it gets up to. We put in a high, then we put in a higher high, and then we reverse. We made higher highs in supply below a pivot. Yes, I'm still bullish, but I sold here. I was only in a runner. When I typed out that alert, literally it blew up to the upside and got up to 90% gains. So you could have taken it if you want. But when I see higher highs and super high supply or heavy supply, I was only in a contract anyways. I was only in a runner. It didn't matter if I got an extra $20, right? The trade's over. So that ended up being my second and final trade, and it was a long one. The chop was absolutely unbearable for the first 27 minutes of the trade. For 27 minutes, unbearable chop. But we finally did end up getting the short squeeze that I predicted. And I told you guys, this is a perfect trend line on ES. I am still bullish for this pre-market analysis to play out, which is at least the supply break on ES. So this is a perfect trend line. If a majority of this drop invalidates, I am bullish. It possibly invalidated here. Did a majority of it invalidate? I wouldn't enter this early. I need more than a majority. I need more than the 61.8 to reject because the PT is so far away. Look at this. It perfectly rejected the 61.8. Not even, just below it. So really, I would need to enter roughly. I can argue an entry here, but because none of the candles closed up there, you can argue an entry here, but ideally you can enter here. But regardless, by now I would be in a long trade right now looking for supply. So if you guys are trading currently, it's a great trade. This is a perfect 3-point touch trend line on ES, which is very bullish. Now, just because it's a great trade, obviously you guys know that doesn't mean it's going to work out. But statistically speaking, if you take this trade 100 times, you will be rich. At least 80 of those times are going to be green. On this particular setup with the perfect trend line, solid 80 to 90, no, probably 80 to 85 times out of 100 you're going to be green. So great trade to take statistically. But that was my morning, and was very happy. Flawless execution, beautiful stop loss. I forgot to mention, I did end up tight when we did go up to here. I did end up tightening up my stop loss to here because the chop was too bad, and by that point, I can call it invalidated as well. But yeah, flawless execution, flawless psychology, good stop losses, good PT setting. It was a solid morning. Unfortunately, it was if you care about win rate, it was only 50% win rate, but I care about money, not win rates. So I'm happy with it. But does anyone have any questions whatsoever with any of the analysis that I just talked about? No, everyone's good. Good to see you, JBS. All right, sweet. Well, I will go ahead and post this recording to the YouTube, and you guys will see in my alert channel when it's ready. And yeah, I'll see you guys in free voice tomorrow. If you need anything, feel free to reach out. And if you continue to trade, good luck. But all right, I'll see you guys later.